and we might get going. I think Renee's still connecting, so let's wait a minute for her to do that comfortably. That's always a terrible feeling when you can see someone's lips moving and you can't hear anything. Slowly, slowly. I think we're nearly there. I might start off today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands we're meeting on. I'm in Sydney in Gadigal land, and you, depending on where you are no doubt somewhere else. So I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any Wanarua land. Thank you, Susan. I should have looked that up. I'm sorry. And anyway, we're all here together, and that's the important thing. I'm Lisa Monsell, and I'm a Health Promotion Officer for the Continence Foundation of Australia. I'm actually a nutritionist. I'm not a nurse continence specialist. So the information I'll be sharing with you today is around general information about prevention of incontinence and what to do if you are incontinent and what it all means. I'd suggest you mute yourselves if you can through the talk, because sometimes background noises can make a bit of a problem for other people. Now, without further ado, I'm going to try and share my screen, which will be interesting, and we can start the talk. I hope you can see that. Okay. There we go. So today I'm here to speak to you about continence and how to invest in your continence so that you can remain as independent as possible for as long as possible. What's happening here? No, I've just got a bit of a... Oh, there we go. Sorry. The Continence Foundation is the peak body for bladder and bowel health in Australia. And the vision of the foundation is to have a community free of the restrictions and stigma of incontinence. We're a not-for-profit organisation and we work nationally. Some of the things we do are to provide a national continence helpline that helps both community members and health professionals around the specific topic of continence and incontinence. We also provide lots of resources, a website where you can trawl through and find out lots of interesting information, and where you can order information and resources for free. Today, I'm going to speak to you about what incontinence is, who's at risk for incontinence, who can help, and then we're going to delve into the 5 healthy habits to invest in. That's why it's called Invest in Your Continence. And I'll also give you some information about the foundation so that you're well equipped to do a bit of research by yourself, because we all know how challenging it can be to get information from the internet when you don't have a good source. Okay, what's continence? When I first started this job, a friend of mine, I was telling a friend of mine and I said, I've got a job in continence. And she said to me, which continent will you go to first? And I thought, oh yes, I think I could probably have said something as silly as that myself a few months ago. But continence is actually being able to choose the time and place where you pass urine or a bowel motion. Now, because we're talking about continence, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. So by urine, it's commonly referred to as weeing, a bowel motion, a poo, or feces, a stool, that's it for that. I'm not going to say anything rude. So that leads us to what incontinence is. And this is the accidental loss of urine or a bowel motion. And this may be infrequent, might only happen a couple of times a week. It might only be a little bit, might be a lot, doesn't matter what it is. That's actually what incontinence is, if you can't control your urine or bowel function loss, sorry. So it's common, but it's not normal. A lot of people think that as you age, incontinence is part of that, or when you have a baby, you become incontinent, and that's just par for the course. But it should never be accepted as being normal. It's a medical condition and it needs a medical response. In Australia, it affects over 5 million people aged 15 or over. So that's over 1 in 4 of the general population. And for women, the statistics are a bit worse. It's 1 in 3 women, but edging towards 2 in 3 women who've ever had a baby. Now, if you think about that, a lot of people don't disclose their problems to their doctors, and that's how those statistics are gathered. So we think that those numbers are actually higher. So if you have an issue with incontinence, you're not the only one. It's just people don't talk about it. Now, urine comes from your bladder. And if you had poor bladder control, you may notice that you rush to get to the toilet. You may leak on your way there. You may be going to the toilet to urinate frequently through the day. Our bladders hold generally between 300 and 400 mils. So that's, if you think about it, it's like a cup and a half. And a normal healthy bladder will only tell you to, or you'll only need to go to the toilet when your bladder's full. So that would mean going to the toilet roughly about 4 to 6 times through the day. And as we get older, not more than twice at night. And for a younger person, getting up to the toilet once overnight. Now, when I say getting up to go to the toilet overnight, that's waking up with the urge to go to the toilet, not waking up, watching a movie, then thinking, oh, well, I might as well go to the toilet as well before I go back to sleep. It's that urge to go to the toilet. And that's called nocturia. If you have poor bowel control, that would look like having an accidental leak. You may be on your way to the toilet to open your bowels and start before you get there. You may notice at the end of the day that your underpants have been soiled and you didn't know that that had happened. You may be straining to empty your bowel. When you strain to empty your bowel, it puts a lot of pressure on your rectum and anus, and often it means that you're constipated, and constipation is a sign of incontinence. And if you're unable to control wind, it would show that you had poor bowel control. So when I say unable to control wind, we're not talking about what happens after you've had a big plate of baked beans. It's more if you were in a social situation where you were trying to impress and suddenly you had the urge to let go and you couldn't stop. So that's that part. And the risk factors for incontinence are really varied. With pregnancy and childbirth, there's a weight on a woman's pelvic floor as the baby grows, and that puts a lot of pressure on the pelvic floor muscles. And then when the dear little baby's born, it's quite big, and it can really stretch everything that allows the baby to come out. And quite often that doesn't revert quickly, and you have problems with incontinence. When women go through menopause, our bodies stop creating estrogen, which that's what makes us fertile. And along with that, the bladder wall thins. So that makes it harder to contract the bladder. So, you know, to contract and hold the urine and then to let it go when you're ready to. With menopause also, it generally happens in middle to older age, and that's the time of our lives when other health conditions start kicking in, unfortunately, so it can all be effective. We also put on weight. Women put on weight generally around their waist, and that weight bears down on your pelvic floor again. Similarly, being overweight puts pressure on your pelvic floor. And don't worry, I'll show you what I'm talking about with regards to the pelvic floor soon. Another factor is childbirth. Constipation, I'm sorry. I was just checking to see if we're recording, but we are. When you're constipated, your bowel is holding the stool or the feces, and that will press on your bladder. And so not only are you not managing to control your bowel and the exit of the stool or the feces, but you're also pressing, or it's also pressing on your bladder, making your urinating tricky. With nerve damage, like when a person has multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disorder, their brain isn't sending the messages to their bladder and bowel effectively. So often there are issues with incontinence. And lots of other health conditions can affect continence, such as if you have asthma or you've had a stroke, if you have diabetes, if you have a chronic cough, if you have heart problems. All those things often are risk factors for incontinence. The big thing is when your pelvic floor muscles are weak, and I'll address that down the track, because you don't want to hear why without the how to help, and we will go into that. If you've had any surgery in your stomach, you know, in your gut region, maybe a bowel, some of your bowel taken out, bowel cancer. If you've had a hysterectomy, sometimes that can affect your continence. And radiotherapy and chemotherapy will also affect it. Another one that a lot of people don't understand is that smoking affects your continence. It often goes hand in hand with a cough, and that puts this incredible pressure on your pelvic floor all the time, weakening the muscle.
Oh, okay.
That's news for someone.
Should I do that?
So you should see your doctor or a health professional if you're rushing to the toilet, if you don't make it on time and leak before you get there, if you're
that's fine. I'm happy to do that.
unable to hold on, can't control passing wind, if you leak when you cough, laugh, or sneeze, or when you're in bed, if you've got trouble passing urine, and if you're straining to empty your bowel. All those things really should be looked at by a health professional.
Aha, here we go. There's the hole for the...
Now, can I just ask someone on an iPad to hit their mute button, please? Was all of that...
How do we mute ourselves?
There should be a little down in the left-hand corner, I think it usually is, a microphone and a symbol of a microphone. And if you press that, it'll go red and a line will go through it. Are you okay with that? I think you've done it. Thank you. Now, oh God, on to the next slide. And for some issues, you should go to the doctors or the hospital quickly. So this is if suddenly you can't pass urine. If your bladder keeps filling up and can't expel the urine, what could happen is your bladder overflows, and so you get this trickling of urine, and you may think, oh, that's okay, now I'm going, but it's not, because it's not coming out the right way. It's just coming out. If this happens, what they generally do is drain your bladder, fairly straightforward, and then look at why that happened. If you have a stinging or burning sensation when you're passing urine, go to the doctors or the hospital. This could, and most likely would be, a urinary tract infection. I'm sure you've heard of a UTI. And if you've been unlucky enough to have UTIs, you'll know that they're very uncomfortable, and you really need to go on a course of prescribed antibiotics to fix that up. You could see, oh, sorry, I've managed to go forward. If you're constipated, that needs to be dealt with. It might just be a matter of changing your diet a bit, or how much you're drinking or what you're drinking. That's really important. If you can't open your bowels, what happens is the stool or the bowel movement, as it sits there, is having the fluid taken out of it. So it actually becomes much harder and much harder to pass. And you can cause damage by straining and passing one of these stools. And I'm sure if you had diarrhea for 24 hours, you'd go to the doctor or a hospital. That can be a sign that something is quite wrong, and you can become dehydrated quickly if you're experiencing diarrhea for a long time. Okay, who can help? This is the important bit. So the people to see if you're having an issue with incontinence, any of those things I've spoken about, are your GP. A nurse continence specialist is like the specialist in the field, incontinence, and a continence physiotherapist, sometimes called a men's health physiotherapist or a women's health physiotherapist. They are trained and experienced in your pelvic floor muscles and what happens around that. They can also help you with strengthening your pelvic floor muscles. A pharmacist is on the list because sometimes it's a medication you're taking that can be changed or tweaked, or an alternative found for you. Pharmacists don't do continence assessments, but they can certainly help in that medical area. If you are having an issue with incontinence, you really should have it checked out. You may be advised to have a continence assessment, and this is where a proper health professional, like a nurse continence advisor, or your GP, or the pelvic floor physiotherapist, they ask you about all your bladder and bowel habits, and you are often asked to do a bladder and or a bowel diary. And from that, the health professional can look at frequency, also things like what the waste product looks like, which can be a good indicator of how healthy your bladder and bowels are. They can recommend treatments or management, and they can also check. Sometimes you can be on a medication that affects your continence, and if they have all of this information at their fingertips, then they're able to move on to work with you to alleviate or manage your incontinence. Sometimes there are examinations or tests involved. Quite often it can just be a matter of looking at your diet and your fluid intake initially to see if there's something that can be upgraded there. If you do need continence products, it should be the doctor or a nurse continence specialist who advises you to do this. Just putting a pad on isn't going to stop your problem. If you leave incontinence unchecked, it can get worse over time, and more than likely will get worse over time. A continence nurse can choose a product that's suitable for you. There are lots of different ways to use products if you are recommended to have them. They can also teach you how to care for the products and how to use them. And they're able to help you to apply for financial assistance for products. There's a number of schemes. In New South Wales, there's the CAPS scheme, or federally it's the CAPS scheme, Continence AIDS Product Scheme, and another one called Enable New South Wales. And also the NDIS has a section that can help. But all of these financial assistance schemes must be done in conjunction with the continence assessment. Now, this is the good part, I think. These are the things that you can do that will actually help you to remain continent and in control as you age. The important thing is that we eat and drink well and we're active. And you would have heard this a million times before. And these messages are put out all the time because they're really important and they're things that we can take control of ourselves. The next two tips, working on your pelvic floor muscles and following certain toilet tips, they're specific to your bladder and bowels. So let's get cracking. It's really important to drink well for both bladder and bowel health. And we encourage you to drink fluid through the day, and water is the best drink. When there's no set amount to drink through the day, it's reliant on our body weight and metabolism, all sorts of things. If you feel you're becoming thirsty, that also means that you're becoming dehydrated. So it's important to drink so that you don't get thirsty. And if you think of, when you're exercising or when it's a hot day, you generally tend to drink more, and that's your body replacing all that fluid that you lose out of sweating. A good way to check if you are drinking enough is indicated by that diagram on the left, and that shows colour of urine that's ideal. Number 1 and 2, which are a pale straw coloured, they're ideal. That means you're drinking enough. At the bottom of that drop, where the urine is quite dark, that means that the urine's becoming really concentrated and that you need to drink more. Sometimes the colour of your urine changes because of taking vitamin pills, some vitamin pills or some medications. I don't know if you've ever eaten beetroot and then noticed that your urine's pink. You think you're dying, but it's actually just the beetroot. And sometimes asparagus can make your urine sort of a bit green and smelly, but you know, you've got your noggin to think that through. It's easy for men to check if their urine's the right colour. All they have to do is look down. For women, we have to jump up from going to the toilet and have a look in the bowl, but it's an easy thing to do, and it just keeps you on top of it every now and then. So if it's pale, it's good. If it's dark, you should start thinking about why is it dark, and have a couple of drinks. Now, we've put on that slide that water's the best drink, and if you think about it, it's in the taps. In Australia, we're really lucky. The tap water is excellent. And you need lots of fluid in your daily intake for lots of processes that our body goes through. There's also fluid in lots of foods. So think about a watermelon, you know, that's just dripping with liquid, or cucumbers. But it's also in things like soups, custards, jellies, anything that's soft often. There are some fluids, though, that irritate your bladder. And I don't know if you remember at the beginning of the talk, but I spoke about trying to, you know, if you're going to the toilet more than 6 times through the day, there might be something not quite right there. If you drink drinks that are high in caffeine, that will make you go to the toilet. They irritate your bladder and make you think you must go to the toilet. So caffeine, I'm thinking tea, coffee, cola drinks, they're quite high in caffeine, energy drinks, hot chocolate, and dare I say alcohol. All those drinks irritate your bladder. And so your bladder starts telling you to urinate when it's only about half full. And if you listen to it all the time, it means you're going to the toilet a lot and your bladder's not filling up and sort of doing what it should do, contracting and then letting go. It's important to eat well. You would have heard lots of talk as you were growing up, I bet, about fibre. And when I was a kid, it used to be referred to as roughage. And that pretty well describes the sorts of foods that are high in fibre. Anything that's really processed, if you think about the difference between white bread, white sliced bread, and bread with seeds and grains in it, that's a good example, I think. Fibre is only found in plant foods. You can't get it from meat or dairy or fish. And the less processed it is, the better. On the screen now are some examples of high fibre foods. So fruits and vegetables, cereals and grains. And if you think, so for example, porridge, as we're coming into winter, that's really good for you because it's made with oats, and it's also good for your heart health and for weight maintenance. And remember I said being overweight puts a pressure on your pelvic floor and can affect your continence. And seeds and grains, they're good. And we also encourage people to try and eat the skin of things if they can. Now, I'm not talking about banana skin, let's not go crazy, but a lot of people peel carrots, for example, but they don't need peeling. That means if you just give them a good wash, you're getting more fibre and actually lots more nutrients, because a lot of the nutrients sit just under the skin. I've sent some resources to Cessnock Library. Thank you, Susan Davey, because she will put those out for you. And one of them is a book about a healthy diet for your bladder and bowels. And that'll show you what a serve size is and how much of these foods you should be eating and where you can get them from. If you increase the fibre in your diet, it's also important to increase how much you're drinking at the same time. because if you increase the fibre and don't increase the water or the fluid at the same time, you may become constipated, and then you'll think I'm a liar, and I'm not. So the fibre is really important in your diet so that you don't become constipated, but also of equal importance in that whole healthy bowel thing is to drink enough, because if you don't have enough fluid in your diet, your bowel movement or your stool, as it moves through your bowel, it doesn't move efficiently and it can get stuck. And the other thing that really helps is movement. If ever you've been laid up in hospital or, sick for a few days, you'll notice that often you stop opening your bowels. So moving really helps. Now this is I'm sure you'll all be rolling around laughing at this. This is called the Bristol Stool Chart. And it was only designed in 1991 to help health professionals recognise the different types of stools that we do and what's going on when you have a change of routine. Type 1 at the top, the stools are really small and hard and dry, and they're very hard to pass. It hurts to pass a stool like that. And the one underneath at type 2 is a sausage shape, but it's really lumpy and dry again. Now, those two sorts of stools probably show that there's not enough fluid in the diet. Then down at the very bottom of the screen, type 7, that goes to the other extreme, and that's when the stool or faeces is almost liquid and there are no individual pieces. And just up from that on the scale are stools that are mushy and very loose and are soft, and they pass too easily. And those sorts of stools probably mean there's not enough fibre in the diet. The ideal stool that we're all looking for is type 4 or maybe type 3. And just picture, if you will, going to Bunnings for a sausage sizzle. That's what you're after, something that's smooth on the outside, easy to pass and soft. Now, I spoke to you earlier about how it was good to urinate about 6 times a day and not more than twice through the night if you're over 65. The stool problems, the stool story is a bit different. There's no golden mean for that. Some people open their bowels 3 times a day. Some people only do it 3 times a week. How often is not the important thing. It's the look of it, and also if your routine changes. So some people open their bowels the same time every day, an hour after breakfast, and it's done. Some people find that, only a few times a week is enough and they feel fine. If you are a once a day kind of a person at a regular time, have a soft stool, and then suddenly you notice you haven't gone much at all over the week and the look of your stool has changed quite a bit, then that should alert you to the fact that things are not right and that you need to see your doctor or, look into it a bit. Being active, you'd have to be living under a rock not to have heard how beneficial this is for us all. You don't need to join a football team or a netball team. It's just important that you take every opportunity you can to move. Going for a walk with friends regularly is a really good way to do it because you catch up on gossip and You turn up more because you don't want to let your friends down, and it's good. You know, you feel much better. It's good for your mood and for your muscle tone, for everything. It's recommended that we exercise for about 30 minutes a day, and if you can exercise or move so that you huff and puff a bit, that's even better. And you don't have to do it all at once. You can do 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes a few hours later, you know, keep going until you've got your 30 minutes worth. But it's really beneficial. And as I said before, it really helps your bowel to work. Now we've talked about it, and now we can look at it. Here's your pelvic floor. I hope I don't have to point out to you which is the male diagram and which is the female, but you'll see that both pictures show a red line that's sitting above your pelvis, and that's called your pelvic floor, and it stretches like a hammock between your pubic bone and your tailbone at the back and from side to side, and that's made up of fine muscles and tissues, and through that the bladder and bowel pass, and for women the uterus goes through, and that's where a baby comes through. So all of that activity will affect your pelvic floor, the muscles, and the exercise that you can do can help to strengthen those muscles. A lot of people don't appreciate that men have pelvic floors too, but we know that as men age, can you see, I'm just trying to bring my pointer around, there's a prostate in a man just under the bladder, and it's through the prostate that the urethra goes, which carries the urine out. And as men age, the prostate gets larger, and sometimes that can affect their urine flow. If a man has a prostatectomy, it's really recommended now to be doing pelvic floor exercises before and after the surgery, because this really helps recovery. Now, because we're all so unfamiliar with the pelvic floor, I'm going to show you two short videos. First, I think it's the woman's first and then the men's, and that'll explain it a bit better. So here we go. Now we'll look at the male one. So that was interesting, wasn't it? It can be very hard to picture where your pelvic floor is in your body, and sometimes you need to see a pelvic floor physiotherapist to check if you're doing the exercise properly. It does take, it can take up to 2 months before you see an effect of strengthening your pelvic floor. But the big thing about that is you don't need any devices, you can just do it yourself. And the easiest way, I think, to do it is to do the exercises at the same time you do something else. For me, I do them when I stand at the sink to wash up, because I always seem to be washing up. And I had to think about it at the start. You know, I had to make myself do it. And now I just do it automatically. A lot of people do it when they're lying in bed first thing in the morning and there's no pressure on the pelvic floor and you don't have much going on externally, so you can concentrate on it and really think about that lifting and then relaxing of the muscles. And you can do them, you can do the exercises standing up, sitting down, lying down. If you're doing them properly, you're not holding your breath, as it said on that, that animation. And you can look at these videos again on our website, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. The last healthy habit is to follow good toilet tips. You'll notice the person on this toilet has got a small stool. That's an unfortunate choice of words. A small thing underneath his foot or her foot, and that's lifted their knees up higher than their hips, and they're leaning forward slightly. Their muscles, their stomach muscles are loose, arms on knees, and that's a really good way to line up to go to the toilet. It sort of mimics squatting. And if you think about that, humans were designed before there were toilets in place everywhere. So if you can put something in front of the toilet to lift your feet up so that your knees are higher than your hips, that'll be really helpful. When you do go to the toilet, you should try and empty completely. It's not a good investment to hang on to it till later. It'll only be harder to get rid of. You should answer what the continence nurses call the call to stool. So if you get the urge to open your bowels, just go and do it. It's not good to strain on the toilet. And the other pointer I can give you is when you wipe your bottom, it's good to wipe from the front to the back. That way there's no cross-contamination. For women particularly, the urethra, which comes from your bladder to empty your urine out, that's quite short. And so it's easy for infections to travel up into your bladder. If you've always wiped from the back to the front, you really have to think about changing that behaviour, but it can be really good, especially if you've had or if you have urinary tract infections often. That can sort of help with that. Okay, I think that's all for that one. Now, the Helpline is run by the Continence Foundation for the government, and this is, if you get nothing from today's talk, if you think I've been talking through my hat, this is the thing you should take away from the talk. The Helpline is staffed by nurse continence specialists, and they're on the line from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, Monday to Friday. They can speak to you about every sort of issue you could imagine to do with your bladders and bowels. They're all really experienced. They all still work clinically. They're right up to date with the latest info. You don't have to be embarrassed. This is their they've got skin in the game, if you will. They know everything, believe me. They can also help with ordering you resources, and with they have service directories which tell you who's available in your location to work with you around your bladder and bowel. So if you're looking, let's say, for a continence pelvic floor physiotherapist, they'd be able to tell you who's close to you. They can tell you where continence clinics are. They can also advise on a continence assessment, and if you need, if you're assessed as needing products, they can speak to you about what financial advice is around for you in your particular situation. That number is 1800 33 0066, and it's a free call from a landline, or you have to pay a mobile phone charge otherwise. It's for community members and for health professionals, and it's confidential. You don't have a follow-up where they say, I spoke to your doctor and I know you're not doing your pelvic floor exercises. It's confidential. So what could be easier than sitting at home talking to a specialist nurse about a problem you're having, who can then suggest to you the next step? It's too easy. If you need to speak in a language that's not English, if you're not comfortable in English, or if it's not your first language, you can call the helpline on 1800 33 0066 and tell them the language you would like to speak in, and they'll get a translator from TIS on the line, and then the translator will interpret for you. And can you imagine, wouldn't it be awful if you didn't feel comfortable in English and you wanted to get help? So if you know anyone, or if you would prefer to speak in another language, please give them that info. Now, the foundation has a website called continence.org.au, and I've just taken a screenshot of the page because we were just speaking about other languages. I just wanted to show you that there are 29 languages other than English where you can hear someone speak about continence issues, or you can download free information and resources. But there are also other tabs across the top that show you where to get support from, how you can live with incontinence. There's a separate area for health professionals, and it covers so many topics, you'd be surprised. If you're savvy with the internet, I'd encourage you to go on and have a look. From the website, you can also order or download lots of free resources. On the left-hand side of the screen is the Bridge magazine, which comes out 4 times a year and has, you often see these in doctors' surgeries. They have case studies, they have a bit of information about research, product information, and it's all about raising awareness of incontinence and dealing with the stigma that surrounds it. Then there are lots of brochures available, for example, overactive bladder and what to do, the healthy diet and bowels, as I spoke of before. There are brochures on pelvic floor muscle training. There are specially designed brochures for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. There's a wealth of information there. Now, I've sent lots of these resources to the library, to Cessnock Library, and you should see them on view soon. You can also ring the helpline and order free resources for yourself or your organisation. There's a free online service or information app called Continence Support Now, and this was designed for disability workers and carers at home. And excuse me, as you can see, there are all these individual entry points that you can look into frequently asked questions and information around topics such as skincare, products and equipment, catheters, bladders, bowels, mobility and toileting. It's got the lot. The National Public Toilet Map, I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a free government map, and you can put it, or an app, you can put it on your phone or look it up on the computer, or you can call the helpline about it. And what it does is give you information about public toilets that are available all around Australia. You put in where you are, and if you're looking for a toilet, say, that's got disabled access or a hoist or a change table, and it can sort through all that. There are over 19,000 toilets listed on that map. And when we all get back to travelling, that map would be gold. You can download that by going to toiletmap.gov.au. There's also, for people who have issues with incontinence or who are caring for someone who has incontinence, there's a service called the Master Locksmith's Access Key. And that's a key that fits into all the disabled public toilets in Australia. You need to apply for this you need to have it signed off by your doctor or a nurse continence specialist, or an OT, I think, can do it too, to say that you need to use the toilet frequently and you have a condition that requires your access to be unimpeded. These cost about $20, and they're available through that public toilet map, and most councils have information about them. This would be invaluable for someone who was stuck at home because they were nervous about going out because of their incontinence. So I'd encourage you to get that key if that's you. Now, I hope I've covered lots of areas about continence for you. I think the big thing about today is to alert you to the fact that incontinence is not normal, and putting a pad on is not the way to deal with it. If you've got a problem, you should see a health professional. The first step that's really easy to take is to ring the Continence Helpline, that 1800 3300 66 number, and speak to a specialist nurse advisor, because they'll know exactly how to help you. Now, I'm going to stop sharing, and we can, oh God, I hope I'm going to stop sharing. Yes. And if you have any questions, this would be the time to ask. No answer was the loud reply. Don't forget you're all on mute if you need to have a chat. I hope you're not asleep. I hope that hasn't sent you to sleep. Oh, thank you, Susan. Susan's just said